and welcome everyone. This is Jessica from CureSMA's Community Support Department, and we're so glad to have you join us for today's Wellness webinar series. A huge thank you to our presenting sponsor, Genentech, for generously supporting this series. And we appreciate all the questions we received in advance of this webinar, and we'll try to answer as many of these as we can during the presentation and Q&A at the end. You're also able to submit questions throughout the webinar by using the questions box, and you can find that located in your GoToWebinar toolbar. I did want to note that all lines will remain muted during the webinar other than for the speakers. And then we'd also like to note that the views and/or advice expressed during these webinars do not represent the opinion of CureSMA. If you have any additional questions after the presentation, you can always contact CureSMA's Community Support Department at communitysupport@curesma.org. And now I'd like to give a warm welcome to our speaker, Tara Davenport, who will be sharing her presentation, Mindfulness for Self-Compassion. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. So I just want to say hello and welcome to everyone here. My name is Tara Davenport, and I'm coming to you today from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am enjoying some just gorgeous fall weather, and I hope you are as well. I am really excited to be back here with you all to share a bit more of my mindfulness practice with you. Today, we are going to dive into a somewhat more challenging topic of mindful self-compassion, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's challenging. It is a really big topic, but I hope this brief introduction into it, as well as the resources that I will share at the end, will bring some benefit to you. But first, I want to start with a story, jumping right in. So several months ago, I bought a new water bottle for my daughter, Claire, and she's 10 years old and she has SMA. And I was rushing to get it opened and cleaned so that we could take it with us to her PT session that day. And in my rush to get that annoying plastic seal off the top, you know, they put on so that nobody can open it in the store, I guess, I grabbed a knife and I was trying to cut it off and working at it. And in my rush to do that, rather than cut the plastic, the knife slipped and went straight into the webbing of my hand. And my immediate reaction was just this intense anger at myself and this huge self-judgment. I mean, I immediately started in with, what the heck were you thinking? You know better than to use a knife this way. What's wrong with you? And then I jumped into all the worst case scenarios about how bad this injury might be and how I maybe wouldn't be able to lift Claire. It was just immediately negative. And it honestly, it sort of took me by surprise with how mean I was being to myself. And just so you don't sit and wonder, it took a few weeks and a round of antibiotics, but it did heal completely. Luckily for me, around that time, I had to choose a topic for a research paper for a mindfulness for social workers class that I'm taking as I work towards a master's degree in social work. And I also had to choose a topic for this workshop. And so based on that strong reaction I had to that experience with the water bottle, I decided that perhaps it would be helpful for myself to jump into a deeper study of mindful self-compassion. So for my research paper, I decided to look at research studies that analyzed the impact of self-compassion and how much a person inhabits those qualities on people with various chronic medical conditions, as well as on caregivers. So both of these groups are, as we all here in the SMA community know, likely to suffer with depression and anxiety and other unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with the stresses of dealing with all the medical issues. So what I found in my research was that across the board, people who had cultivated a mindset that included higher levels of self-compassion had better mental health outcomes. And every study that I read also would mention other studies on people with other chronic conditions and other caregiving situations that produced similar results. The research clearly showed if we can foster a sense of compassion for ourselves, particularly when things get hard, we can cope better. So let's dig into this. To begin, let's define compassion. and then we'll move into self-compassion from there. So compassion can be understood as recognizing the suffering of others, coupled with a desire to help. And it's this component of action that makes compassion different from, say, empathy or sympathy or pity. Compassion includes this desire to help. It's a desire to help alleviate another person's suffering. Not that you necessarily can help to alleviate the suffering, but that wish or that desire is there. And as a quick side note, I want to say that I use the term suffering quite a bit in this workshop, and I use it very broadly. Suffering can be a hangnail. It can be an argument that you might have with someone. It can be an illness. It can be being stuck in traffic. It can be any number of things that just puts us into a state of pain or of misery. So I just want to be clear, we aren't just talking about the big stuff here. Some people might prefer to think of it in terms of a struggle rather than a suffering, which is fine. It's all the same idea, and we all use whatever language makes sense to us. Okay, so if compassion is recognizing the suffering or the struggle of others and having a desire to help, then self-compassion takes this feeling of compassion that we've generated and it turns it back onto ourselves. It's basically treating ourselves the way we would treat a friend or a child if they were having a hard time. So I can tell you for sure that if one of my kids sliced their hand open on accident, I would never say, "You know better than that. Why did you do that?" I would have said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, you're hurt. Here, let's get some pressure on this. Can someone get me some ice? Let's see what we need to do here." And then you know what I would do? I would hug them. I would not berate them. It's how we treat other people. Every one of us is born with the natural tendency towards self-compassion. So think about this. If you are sitting in a way that's uncomfortable, it's a form of suffering, right? And since we all have an inherent tendency towards self-compassion, without even being aware of it, what do? We shift our weight a little bit. Or we ask someone to help us shift our weight if that's what we need. But our innate response, without even really thinking about it, is to recognize our discomfort and then move to help ourselves feel better, right? So that's self-compassion. When we are stressed, when we are suffering, when things feel heavy, we want to get ourselves out of it. We just naturally want to. And when we're sitting in an uncomfortable position, it's fairly easy to figure out how to help get ourselves out of it. But it's harder to see clearly when we're in a state of stress or a state of tension. So if we practice and we develop our sense of self-compassion at times when we're less stressed and in less tension, then as our circumstances get more challenging, we have the skills to meet those challenges from this place of self-compassion because we've trained in it. So there are many, many ways to work towards cultivating more self-compassion in our lives. If you Google it, you'll come up with lots of different ideas. Today, I'm going to share with you how you can use mindfulness and meditation to practice cultivating this sense of self-compassion for yourself. So at this point, let's take a little detour from talking about self-compassion so that we can discuss in more depth what mindfulness and meditation are. If you have been to workshops with me before, this might seem like a review, but I know for me, I had to hear this and experience all of this many, many times before I truly got it. So stick with me and just listen. You might hear something new or hear it in a different way. So mindfulness can be defined with just two words: intentional awareness. Intentional awareness. So our awareness is what we are paying attention to in any given moment. And we can be intentional about that, or we can just let our minds run free and whatever's the next shiny thing gets our attention. But if we think of our attention as a spotlight, we can shine that spotlight of our attention or of what we're being mindful about on anything that we want. So like right now, I can choose, I'm going to be mindful of what I can see. And so I notice my computer screen. I notice some brightness coming in from the window behind me. I can see lots of colors around me in the room. I'm just putting my full awareness or my full focus on my sense of sight, on what I can see right now. We could also practice intentional awareness or putting our spotlight of our attention on what we feel. So right now I can feel the weight of my body as I sit in my chair. And I can feel the pressure of the chair and all the points that my body makes contact with that chair. I'm putting the full spotlight of my attention on that sensation of sitting in my chair right now. We could also choose to put that spotlight of our attention on what we hear. So as I sit here right now, I can hear my fan. I can hear a dog barking. I'm just putting the full spotlight, all of my attention on what's happening right here in this present moment. And when we do that, when our full attention is in this present moment, we are practicing mindfulness. So that's mindfulness, intentional awareness. Meditation then is taking this idea of mindfulness or this intentional awareness and simply practicing intentional awareness for a period of time. So you could have a meditation as you are standing in line at the grocery store, and you can become intentionally aware as you stand there and wait of the sounds that you hear. Or you can choose to do a meditation for 5 minutes as you're sitting in the car waiting for someone, and you can focus just on the sensations of your breath. You can meditate in bed at night under your covers, and you can feel the weight of the blanket or the sheet on your arms. You can feel the support of the bed underneath you, just focusing on those sensations, being intentionally aware of a focus for your attention for an extended period of time. And that's meditation. And that's a nice description of how we meditate, but I also always like to share the best just overall working definition of meditation that I've come across. And it is skillfully using our minds to bring benefit to ourselves and those around us. So skillfully using our mind, choosing how we're going to use our mind, what we're going to put our attention on to bring benefit to ourselves and those around us. So I was thinking, let's take a minute right now and together do a brief, just 2 to 3 minute meditation, just to try it out. So like I explained a minute ago, in meditation, we find an anchor for our attention, whether that's the sounds around you, the sensations of where you're sitting or laying down, or most commonly in meditation, we use the sensations of our breath in our body. And we do this because no matter where we are, our breath is always with us and it can ground us back. And we can always drop into those sensations. So in this meditation that we're going to do, we're going to focus on where we feel the breath in our body and just spend a few minutes being intentionally aware or really mindful of those sensations of our breath. I want to emphasize this is not about controlling our breath or trying to breathe in any particular way. It is really just being aware of the sensations of the breath. Even if you have a machine that helps you breathe, it's just being aware of those sensations. Let's give it a try. So if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes for this practice. And if you're not, just lower your gaze, soften your gaze. Closing our eyes helps to block out some of the visual distractions that we might have. And as we sit here, let's just take a couple of breaths as we settle in. And as we breathe, seeing if you can feel any movement in your body as you breathe. Can you feel your belly expand and contract? Can you feel your chest, maybe as it rises up and lowers back down? Maybe you can even feel your collarbone move, just ever so slightly, up and down as you breathe. Can you feel your back, maybe as it presses into your chair or your bed, and then pulls slightly away? Just finding a place where you can most vividly feel that movement and put your attention on that sensation. The expanding and the contracting. Maybe a sense of tightening and then release. Choosing to right now intentionally continue to move your attention back to that sensation. If you find yourself thinking about something else, which you will, just kindly bring your attention, that spotlight of your awareness, back to the sensations of your breath. Just for a couple more breaths now. And whenever you're ready, opening your eyes. So how was that for you? It is hard to keep your attention on just one thing, isn't it? Of course it is, because it is not what we are used to doing. But I wonder how many of you sat in judgment of yourself, saying things like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I can't do this because my mind is too busy, or some other form of self-judgment. But if you chose to be here today watching this workshop, you clearly want to learn more about meditation, right? So I want you to think for a minute, if a dear friend shared that they were trying out meditation and that they found it hard, would you say, you dummy, why do you think you can meditate? You're too scatterbrained. No, we don't talk to other people that harshly. Yet all too often it's how we speak to ourselves, isn't it? Okay, so now that we all have this common understanding, working understanding of mindfulness and meditation, let's circle back around and bring this all together to see how we can use this mindfulness meditation to help us foster a sense of self-compassion. So the practice of mindful self-compassion that I'm going to share with you today was developed by Dr. Kristen Neff at the University of Texas in Austin. She is a professor and a researcher in the field of mindful self-compassion, and I'll share later today how you can learn more about her and her research and her practices. So in this practice that she has developed and extensively researched, mindful self-compassion has 3 components to it. You don't need to try and remember these or write them down. We're going to go over them several times and then we're going to practice them. So the 3 components are mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. So again, mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. Okay, let's break those down a little bit. So to practice mindful compassion, mindful self-compassion, the first component that we have to have is mindfulness. And you'll recall that our definition of mindfulness is 2 words, intentional awareness. Becoming more intentionally aware of our sensations, or even of our thoughts and of how we're feeling. So when we're more mindful in our lives, we will be more aware of the moments when we're needing this sense of self-compassion without realizing, oh, I'm suffering right now. But instead just continuing on to the next thing that pulls our attention, we can't cultivate this inner wisdom that maybe we need a little bit of compassion right now, which means we're going to look outside of ourselves to try and make ourselves feel better, which means we might go grab a candy bar or have another drink. Or my favorite, hop onto social media where it looks like nobody ever suffers, right? We all put our shiny bits and pieces out there. There are many, many unskillful things that we do to try to alleviate our suffering when we're not really aware that we are suffering. But with some mindfulness or some intentional awareness on how we're feeling and what's happening in the present moment, we can more easily realize that we need a little bit of care or support. So that's the first component, mindfulness or awareness. And I'll say for me, this is the hardest because like many of you probably do, I spend much of my life on autopilot, moving on to the next thing without taking that time always to stop and drop into how I'm really feeling in the moment. So the second component is after we become aware that we are in a moment of suffering or unease, to then move into a space of giving ourselves kindness. This is that step of self-kindness. The idea here is to go against what might have become natural or what you fall into the habit of doing. And rather than saying things like, you're always late, why can't you leave on time? Or, I can't believe you said that in that meeting today. To a space of more how you would talk to a dear friend who you really love, or to a child. And I know for me, I like to couple this with a sympathetic touch. I mean, if we're talking to a friend who's having a hard time, you might reach out and touch their shoulder, or maybe you would touch their hand. And we can give this same sympathetic touch to ourselves. We can say, oh, wow, this is hard. I'm sorry that you're dealing with this. You are so strong for all you do. Or my most favorite, you are so good at hard things. I say that to my kids all the time. We do hard things. We can do this. In this component of the practice, we're really just looking to find a little bit of space to be kind to ourselves rather than to sit in that place of self-judgment. We aren't expecting this to make the pain or the suffering go away. In fact, wishing for that will often make it worse. We're instead mindfully accepting that in this moment, there is suffering present. It is painful. And in response to that pain, we're embracing ourselves with kindness and care. So that's the second component. The last component of this practice is common humanity, or as I like to say, universalize it. Sometimes when things get hard, our view can get really narrow and tight, and it's really easy to over-identify with the suffering. I'm sure we're all familiar with this woe is me and why me, why is this happening to me? And this idea of bringing common humanity is to broaden that view back out again, to help us to remember that we are not alone in this. As much as joy and love and happiness are part of the human condition, unfortunately, so is suffering. We all suffer. We are all flawed. We all make mistakes. We all do dumb things, like sticking a knife in our hand. So including this idea of common humanity as part of our self-compassion, it really helps us remember this unavoidable fact that we do all suffer. And remembering this connection that we have with others helps us to remember that we are not alone in our suffering. So those are the three components that make up a mindful self-compassion practice: mindfulness or awareness, self-kindness, and common humanity. Okay, so there's many different ways to do this mindfulness self-compassion practice. One that I've been using a lot lately is just when you're out there living your life, out in the world doing what you do. And for example, I recently injured my back, and my recovery was, and honestly still is, going quite slowly. And so I was hobbling down the stairs, groaning with each step, wondering, will I be able to move clear again? When is this going to be over? And right there on the stairs, I stopped. And this is the awareness part. I was aware of, in this moment, I'm suffering. This really stinks. And since I was in my house and I was okay with it, I maybe wouldn't have done this at Target, I put my hand on my heart and I just said to myself, oh, Tara, I'm so sorry you're hurting and I wish you weren't. And I just paused with that feeling of just compassion for myself, just like I would if my husband had hurt his back. I just sat with that feeling of compassion for myself. And then I thought, I wonder how many other people in the world are experiencing pain today and who are struggling with pain. And I just sent out a similar wish or a similar desire that I'm so sorry that all of us are hurting and I wish we weren't. So I was 1 minute, if even, a minute of self-compassion. Taking just that brief time to cultivate that sense that I can be kind to myself, especially when things are hard. I do wish that I didn't have to suffer. I'm not sitting in pity or woe is me. I am just acknowledging that right now in this moment I'm suffering and I'm responding with some care. I wish none of us had to suffer, but here we are. So you can take it on the go like that and use it out in, as you're busy in your daily life. But you can also sit with these same ideas in a meditation practice. And again, meditation is when we practice this intentional awareness for a period of time. And in this case, we're being intentionally aware. We're choosing to focus our attention on these three components of mindful self-compassion: mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. And when we practice in this way, maybe we aren't really suffering in this moment because we're choosing when we're going to do our meditation. But in order to cultivate this sense of self-compassion in ourselves and our meditation practice, we bring to mind a situation that causes us some stress or a struggle. And we hold that situation in mind as we work through these three components of mindful self-compassion. We intentionally think about each one as we work to basically strengthen this self-compassion muscle, because that's ultimately the way that we get benefit, the benefit that I found in my research that I shared earlier. If this muscle of self-compassion is strengthened and it becomes something that we do more inherently, even in the hard times, that is how we can have better coping skills and those better mental health outcomes that we found in the studies. So we strengthen this in our meditation practice, which then allows us to better do that when those hard circumstances come in and just respond from that place of a bit more love. So there are many, many guided meditations that you can find on the internet to take you through this practice. And I'm going to share some of those with you later, but I wanted to take us through just a 5 to 7 minute meditation on self-compassion together, just so that we can try out these three components and spend a little bit of time with this. I will say that as we start, I will ask you to think of a situation that's causing you a little bit of stress or some tension right now, and we're going easy today. Okay, this is just a little practice to get us familiar with these sensations and these feelings. So please don't try and think of something big and major. This is going with the hangnail or something a little bit easier like that. Sound good? All right, if you're ready, then I invite you to give this a try with me. So let's begin by, again, closing our eyes, if you're comfortable with that. And again, let's just find that sensation of your breath. Maybe again in your belly, in your chest. Just taking a minute right now to come into this present moment. Just being right here, right now. I invite you to think of a situation in your life that is causing you just a little bit of stress or tension. Maybe it's a work issue. Maybe it's what it feels like to be stuck in traffic. Or when Starbucks is out of your favorite syrup. Nothing big here. Just bring to mind an area of some type of struggle. Now, try to visualize this situation really clearly in your mind's eye. What is the setting? Who is saying what to whom? What is happening? What might happen? And now as you hold this situation in your mind, try to notice, can you feel some discomfort in your body as you bring this difficulty to mind? Maybe some tightness somewhere. Maybe your heart beats a little bit faster. Or your breath gets shorter. Maybe your eyes are more clenched. Maybe as you think about this, your shoulders have raised up a bit. Just seeing if you can get comfortable with this idea of discomfort in your body when you think about this situation. Now, try saying to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. This is struggle. Perhaps some other wording works better for you. Maybe this is stressful. Or I don't like this. This hurts. This is that moment of mindfulness, that component of bringing awareness to our suffering. Now, if you're comfortable, try offering yourself a gesture of soothing touch. Maybe it's as simple as rubbing your two fingers together, putting your hand on your leg, maybe putting your hand on your heart. And try saying what you need to hear right now. I'm sorry this is happening. May I be kind to myself. Whatever words you might offer a friend in a similar situation. This is that component of self-kindness. You deserve some kindness, and you can offer it to yourself. Now try saying to yourself, suffering is a part of life. This is that idea of remembering our common humanity. You might say to yourself, I'm not alone. Everyone experiences this just like me. This is how it feels when people struggle in this way. And if it feels right for you, maybe just sending a wish for less suffering out into the world. May we not suffer. May we find peace. Just sitting here for a few more moments, holding this space for ourselves and our own suffering, just as we would a dear friend. And when you're ready, you're welcome to open your eyes. How was that for you? I hope that it brought at least a glimmer of how being kind to ourselves is something that feels good. And honestly, it might feel a little bit weird when we're first starting out. But I hope that it also just felt a little bit peaceful. And again, to stress, this isn't trying to solve this suffering or this struggle. It's just an acknowledgement that this is happening for me right now, as it does for every person on earth, and then just being kind to ourselves about it. And then hopefully, as we cultivate this and we get better at doing this for ourselves, we begin to see some of those benefits that I talked about in the research. So if you want to dig deeper into this concept of self-compassion, again, it's mindful self-compassion. It's a very broad topic. It's an interesting one. There's a lot of different people out there studying it, and there's lots of different ways to do it. Again, this one that I presented today is just one of many. And it's the work of Dr. Kristen Neff. And I think that the Cura SMA staff will put a link to her website in the chat right now. But it's, yeah, there it is. So it's self-compassion.org. Self with a hyphen in there, compassion.org. And I just, I want to acknowledge this. Self-compassion can be hard for us, especially when we're not used to practicing it. So if you did find this challenging today, but you want to keep trying it and dig a little bit deeper, I really encourage you to go check out her website, because she has so much great information in there, both the research and guided meditations and some journaling questions and different things that you can do. But I hope that just this introduction brought you some benefit today. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions if there are any.
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. And hello, everyone. This is Sarah with QRSMA's Community Support Department. So as Tara mentioned, next we're going to go over some questions that have come in from the community. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can always add them to the questions box on your GoToWebinar toolbar. So just let us know. So the first question that we have is, what is the difference between self-compassion and self-pity?
So self-compassion and self-pity, it really feels like a super fine line between those two. But actually, self-compassion can be an antidote to self-pity. So self-pity is when we really get mired down in the whole idea of woe is me and why is this happening to me? And we almost get into a state of over-identifying with our own suffering. Like I said, it's when things get really tight and closed down. And then self-compassion includes that component of the common humanity and the understanding that we're not alone in this. Even if we're alone right now in our circumstances, we're not alone in the world with this, that there are other people suffering and suffering in similar ways. And so self-compassion has that understanding of the common humanity, of universalizing it, as well as that wish and that holding ourselves in kindness and saying the kind words to ourselves. So it just expands and helps us see, I think, the bigger picture than self-pity, when we just get more, I always call it wallowing or mired down, rather than the big picture.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And then our next question is, aren't you afraid if you don't give yourself some tough love that you'll get lazy and complacent? I know that kind of touches on our go, go, go. We always have to prioritize going and doing. And so we'd love some insight on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to keep pushing you if you don't push yourself, right? I think that's sort of that mindset that we can all get into. And there is a fear out there that self-compassion is going to somehow make us weak and vulnerable. But in fact, a lot of the research really does show that self-compassion is like, it's a reliable source of inner strength that helps us have more courage. It helps us be more resilient. It really, it helps us with that self-motivation and that trying to get things done, because it is a positive attribute to that. It's not just continuing to beat ourselves down. And I can tell you, I know probably for certain that most of us are really good at that, and we're going to continue to encourage ourselves and keep ourselves going, and probably continue to be hard on ourselves. And this just gives us just a moment of space to just allow ourselves to be more kind and be more compassionate, which encourages us. I mean, with our own kids, with our dear friends, you know, we don't use tough love. We do sometimes, but we combine that with compassion and with love, especially when there's suffering present. So I really think that the two of them can go hand in hand and complement each other.
Thank you so much for that. And then another question, kind of two-part, that came in live here. Do you have ways that you would suggest to practice this with your kids, like easy tips for them?
I love that idea. In fact, just yesterday, my daughter Claire, we were out of school for election and voting. And we were working on her times tables, and she told me, oh, I'm so awful at times tables, I can't do them. And she got teary-eyed and was getting herself all worked up. And I said, okay, Claire, I want you to think for a minute. If this was your best friend Katie standing here and she was crying and saying, I'm not good at times tables, I don't like this, what would you say? And she said, I would tell her I'm not good either. And I said, okay, you know, that's helpful, but what would you say to her to try and make her feel better? And she said, I would tell her, keep practicing, Katie. I know you can do this. You've got this. And I said, can you say those same things to yourself? And at first she didn't think that she could. And I said, just try it. See how silly it makes you feel. And she did. And then honestly, she jumped right back into it and kept going. So I think that sometimes modeling this for our kids and giving them the words to say to themselves that show them that compassion and that kindness, and pointing out that, you know, other kids struggle with similar things. You know, I think that that is a starting point for sharing that with our kids.
Wonderful, thank you, Tara. And then our final question today, I know you mentioned the self-compassion.org resource, but were there any other like websites or apps that you suggest people have to get into mindfulness more?
Yes, the biggest one that I always recommend, and thank you for reminding me about this, is the Insight Timer meditation app. And you can find it at the App Store. I think, yeah, thank you, Sarah, for putting that in. And it's a great app that has guided meditations on pretty much any topic you can think of. So if you put mindful self-compassion or just self-compassion in there, you'll come up with, Krista Neff has quite a few on there, as well as other people. You can also set a timer to do a silent meditation, and you can set it to have bells that will chime periodically throughout, so that if your mind does wander off, which it will, it helps you when you hear that bell to remember to come back to what you're trying to put your attention and your that intentional awareness back on, what that anchor is for yourself. And they just have anywhere from 2-minute quick meditations on topics to, you know, super long ones that you can access. And it's a free app. You know, you can get extra benefits if you want to pay extra for it. Another person who does a lot on mindful self-compassion is a woman named Tara, same as me, but pronounced differently. Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H. And she has a beautiful self-compassion meditation called the RAIN practice, which is another lovely one. So again, there are so many ideas out there for how to cultivate this sense of self-compassion within each of us. And you know, if you Google it, you'll find lots of Kristen's ideas and other ones out there.
Thank you so much, Tara. This is Colleen McCarthy O'Toole from QRSMA's Community Support Department. And thanks again. We are so grateful for everybody that joined us today, and especially to Tara for presenting this great presentation. You will all be receiving a follow-up email with a survey link, and we would appreciate any feedback that you have to share with us. We will also be emailing our randomly selected prize winner within the next 24 hours as well. Congratulations and thank you again. We are so thankful for the incredible support from our presenting sponsor, Genentech, for making the Wellness webinar series possible. If there's anything that we can do for you, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at communitysupport@qrsma.org. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.